The movie starts with Mary, a very hardworking lady on her team, and her colleague Bob, who are discussing the wharf project and how she deserves her week off from work and more. When Mary gets back to her office to wrap up for the day, her friend and colleague Yolanda jokingly asks about how Kent, her boyfriend, will probably propose to her during the weekend. Yet, Mary is more concerned about how adventurous her weekend would be. Mary drives up to the front of her parents' house, gets out of the car, and goes into the house. She ensures that she knocks first, but without receiving any answer, she decides to simply go in. She greets her parents and her mother, Betty, who is preparing a meal, but pauses to hug her. Her father, Mike, who is sitting and drinking a cup of juice, asks about Kent, thinking they were in Silver Falls, and she says she is on her way to pick him up. Mike doesn't think much of Kent, but Mary defends Kent as being more manly than her father gives him credit for. She proceeds to ask about her brothers, and he replies to her, talking about them working their own jobs. Mary thinks they should still be working for Mike, especially because he taught them everything they know. Mike is convinced that they also have a right to try and make it on their own, conveys this to her, while informing her about his misgivings about her and her sister's own absences. Mary gives him an excuse, blaming the wharf project for keeping her busy. She conveys to her father how much she actually prioritizes family time, cementing that she is not necessarily the one to blame, as she reminisces fondly about how she really liked it when they all spent more time together. Her father is accepting of the situation and believes she should be too. He tries to make her comfortable with changing times. Mary, however, is doubtful that she will or should get used to it, and wish things simply would not change. She thinks about how stressful it would be for her to adapt to not having her family together the way they were. After taking a deep breath, she finally asks about how her grandpa is doing, and Betty pretends everything is fine. She tries to make light of the situation. She answers that he has his good days and his bad, but Mike wants to be honest and reveals to her how there are sadly more bad than good days lately. He also adds that at some point they are going to have to sit down and make some hard decisions. But Mary doesn't feel emotionally ready to talk about it. Betty, still trying to stay positive, informs Mary that Kathy is up with their grandpa, and she is sure they will both be happy to see her. She goes upstairs. When she is out of their sight, Mike tells Betty that they cannot lie about their grandpa's health forever. Betty is thinking of the soft-hearted Mary, who is unwilling to face the situation head-on. Mike, who is more logical than sentimental, stands by the fact that they will have to make a decision soon, despite Mary not being ready to even think about it. Betty is aware of how much of a toll it is taking on his heart as well. Mike points out that Grandpa is his father, and Betty nods affirmatively, trying to be a form of comfort for her husband. When Mary goes up into the room, Grandpa is on the bed and Kathy, her sister, is checking his blood pressure. It's unsettling to see her grandfather this way. But upon spotting her, he is simply excited to see her. It's both a heartwarming, yet heartbreaking moment. Kathy can't help but mention, while she's checking his blood pressure, that every time he sees Mary, it spikes. Mary jokingly asks if that is a good thing, and Kathy calls her the love of his life, adding that they will simply have to accept that. When Mary sits down next to her grandpa, he jokes about a lot of things, and Kathy reminds him that the doctor recommended for him to rest, unsettled by his sudden overstimulation, as someone who just recently had heart surgery and is about 80 years old. Kathy adds that it takes a little longer to recover from heart surgery when one is his age. Grandpa insists that he is as strong as an elk, asking Mary to confirm his claim. Mary agrees, fighting back her tears, but states that he still has to listen to his doctor and Kathy. The moment is so emotional, but Grandpa still continues to joke about things. Then, a moment after that, Betty comes in to relieve Kathy. She doesn't want her to be late for her shift at the hospital. Kathy urges Betty to call her if she needs her. Mary gets up to leave too, and kisses her grandpa on his cheek. He asks that she says hello to her grandmother for him. Mary tells him that if he keeps listening to Kathy, he can say hello to her himself. Mary leaves, promising to swing by when she returns. Kathy and Mary run into their brothers at the entrance of the house. The brothers, Pete and Matthew, teases her about getting married soon, and about how Kent might end up popping the question. Mary is driving to their destination in the mountains, and Kent is in the car. He is talking about a jazz festival he wants them to attend in New York, but Mary is distracted and isn't listening. He snaps her back at attention once more and asks if she likes the plan, but she says she was hoping they could get tents and go camping instead. They get to a hotel in the mountains, and Mary wonders if he is ready to go hiking, but Kent wants to spend the first day there in a pool. Mary insists they go there to get some sunlight and fresh air. She gives him a kiss on the lips. The situation feels awkward and forced. They go hiking, but this really isn't Kent's style. He asks for a break while walking and panting heavily. He points out how Mary hasn't even broken a sweat. They sit down on a rock for a discussion. Mary explains to her boyfriend that she has been doing this her whole life. Curious, Kent asks her what she likes about the mountain. According to her, when she comes up there, it feels like all her troubles disappear. Mary begins to tell Kent the story about her grandpa, bringing her up to mountains and imparting beautiful words of wisdom and knowledge to her about nature and spirituality. They continue the hike, but Kent asks that they slow down. As they walk, they hear a dog barking and then a child's cry for help. They find the child down in a ditch with a bleeding knee. Although Kent's initial thought is to go get help, Mary insists on going down to help the child. But Kent worries for her own safety, not really believing in Mary. She explains to him that she will be fine and gives Kent a hug. Mary scrambles down to get the child, whose name she learns is Charlene. Mary asks how she got in this situation. The little girl explains that her dog, Natty, chased a rabbit down there and got stuck, so she came down to get her dog. Mary, concerned for the girl, asks about her parents. The girl explains that she lives with her father on the other side of the ridge. After all the struggle, Mary puts Charlene on her back, and they go up and out. The dog follows suit. Kent suggests they take her to a hospital, but Mary says she thinks they should take her home instead. Kent, being a stand-up guy, carries Charlene all the way to her house in a place called Christmas Lodge. Mary is surprised she lives there and asks if her father is Jack Rand, a person she knew as a child. Kent looks down on the Christmas Lodge, literally as well as figuratively, and refers to it as an old whack. This causes Mary to smack at him. Jack Rand, the little wounded girl's father, is relieved that she has returned back home. Charlene lies to him, saying she sprained her ankle while getting the mail. He doubts this story, but decides to let her be. Jack also ends up recognizing Mary as well. After they exchange pleasantries, he invites them in for food so they can catch up. Kent finds this exciting. Jack awkwardly relays to Mary how the Christmas Lodge must not be exactly how she remembers it, but Mary doesn't care. She's a dreamer and can still picture what it used to be like to be there, stating that it was magical. She glows as she conveys this to Jack, admiring the whole lodge in awe. They finish eating, and Jack shows them a photo album filled with pictures of every guest who has ever stayed there. He explains that once they are done with renovations, they would continue the tradition and start a new album. He explains how his parents were involved in a fatal accident, which set the renovation process back for years. Mary, willing to help after hearing something so depressing, asks him if he has considered applying for a private grant to fund the renovation. She wants to help her old friend bring back the magic of the lodge. Jack says he has not, but he is willing to do anything. An enthusiastic Mary readily lends her hand and promises to do some research on available grants when she returns to the city. Jack is thankful, so he offers to give them a ride back to their hotel. They arrive at the hotel and Kent is just glad to have signal again. He jumps out of the car, but Mary doesn't immediately follow. She waits back, thanking Jack for the ride, while Kent is preoccupied with thinking about the things that make him and Mary very different. Jack hands Mary a photograph of her family at the lodge, while subtly showcasing how they share the same values. She is reluctant to collect them, but he insists, so she promises to make copies of them and return the originals. At this moment, Jack expresses his appreciation for her, saying that he looks forward to seeing her again. She admits she's looking forward to seeing him again too. Additionally, Charlene hopes she can help him get the lodge running again. As they walk into the hotel, Kent becomes curious about what took her so long. He asks if she is sure she can help revive the old lodge. She replies, insisting she is willing to try, because it's a valuable part of their history. Furthermore, she thinks it will be a labor of love, because she has always wanted to work in a lodge, something Kent does not really understand. In the next scene, Mary returns alone from their trip, pine cone in one hand and the photographs in the other. Her father, Mike, is in the living room. He asks how her trip went and if Kent proposed. Mary asks if he would be glad if Kent had proposed, but he does not answer. Mike explains that he does not dislike Kent, but thinks he is simply too much of a city boy. Mary gives Mike the photographs and explains how she came about them. Mike stares at the photo. They seem to take him back in time. He confesses about not having thought about the lodge in years, but he remembers Jack. Mary explains the condition of the lodge and states that she is in search of a grant to help with the renovation. She also needs Mike, Pete, and Matthew to go inspect the lodge so they can make an estimate of how much it would cost to renovate it. Mike already knows that it will definitely cost a lot of money. Of course, Mary is still willing to try. Mike explains that old buildings like the Christmas Lodge definitely cost a lot of money in repairs and renovation. Mary, as someone who handles the renovation and reconstruction of old buildings in cities, thought that a simple lodge would be cheap to fix. Mike advises her that they should just let the lodge go and count their losses. Mary is visibly upset and states that Grandpa would never say something like that. Mike explains that a sentimental project will do nothing but drain money, time, and energy. Mary explains that she had thought they should all go up there again with her grandpa for a good old-fashioned Christmas get-together. Mary then heads upstairs to her grandpa. Betty is reading a book to him when Mary makes her entrance. She hands him the pine cone, and he smells it. The item brings back joyful, bittersweet, and exciting memories. She then gives him the photographs. He admires his late wife's beauty with teary eyes. When Mary explains that they stumbled upon the lodge and were given the photos, Grandpa states that he believes they were led there by his late wife. Mary then goes to the living room. Her sense of purpose is reinvigorated by her grandfather's reaction. She takes the remote control and turns off the TV her father was watching. She tells him she refuses to give up on the lodge because it represents a lot of their family's history, adding that Jack deserves a chance to continue his family's legacy. She asks her dad to go with her brothers to inspect the lodge, no matter the cost. Mary returns to the city to work. The scene continues with Yolanda going on and on about all the work she had to do, covering for Mary. She asks if Kent proposed to Mary. After learning he did not, Yolanda looks disappointed. Mary shares that the trip was fulfilling in unexpected ways. As they speak, Bob goes by the office, but stops to praise Yolanda for what she did covering for Mary. Mary uses the opportunity to ask if he has any knowledge on acquiring grants for old lodges. Bob tells her all his work has been in the city, but he's almost certain the process should be the same. Mary calls Jack to let him know that she has good news. Jack is pleasantly surprised, believing that it has been quite a while since he heard those two words used together. The good news is that she spoke to her boss, and he is willing to apply for a grant on their behalf. Also, her father and brothers, who are licensed contractors, will come around to get an estimate for the grant application. Jack is left speechless. Jack explains that his family has always looked after the Christmas Lodge themselves, so Mary makes it clear that they are only there to advise him and not take over the work. They then make arrangements to meet on a Saturday. Later in the evening, Kent invites Mary to dinner in a restaurant where he breaks up with her. He believes that they are both cut out for different lifestyles and are on different trails that do not end at the same destination. Mary tries to negotiate a compromise, but Kent insists that she would be miserable and it would not be good for either of them. Mary is left heartbroken by his words. Mary is back home with her mother in the living room. She is in tears, crying about the breakup as her mother tries to console her. Betty shows positivity towards her daughter, reassuring her that she is more than enough. She lets her know that she is a smart, beautiful, and adventurous woman, and Kent is just not a good match for her. Mary, like everyone else, thought Kent was going to propose. She really loved him, and she was even willing to change to suit his needs. But Betty, being wise, lets her know that pretending to be someone she is not would not be good for the relationship. Betty does what all wise parents ought to do. She encourages her daughter to be truthful to herself and to the world. Only then will the right person come. In the next scene, Mary arrives with her father and brothers to inspect the lodge. After the introductions, they get to work, inspecting every inch of the old building. Jack explains that he was going to do it himself, but the blizzards have been hard on the building, and he can barely catch up. Mike understands the severity of the damages on the lodge before even seeing it. Mary and Charlene look at more pictures in the photo album. Charlene points at Grandpa, asking if he is Mary's grandfather. Mary confirms this, so Charlene asks that she brings Grandpa with her to the lodge soon, because she misses her late grandfather. Mary promises to bring him up there, but Mike overhears their conversation and asks to speak to her. He tells her not to make promises to the little girl, especially ones that she cannot keep. Mary insists she's not going to give up on her grandpa and the lodge. Mike explains that the old man's survival is about as likely as the lodge fixing itself. He warns her against getting her hopes up. They sit down to eat at the dining table, where Jack places the biscuits. Mike says grace before they all dig in. Matthew and Pete praise the sourdough biscuits and ask Jack what the secret ingredient is. Jack explains that they never actually figured it out, but it might be the water or the old stove that has been used to make the biscuits for a very long time. Mary has a different opinion. She states that it has something to do with the Christmas Lodge having a heart of its own, and it just wants people to be happy. Later in the evening, Jack and Mary gather logs to make fire. It's the perfect scenario to spark some romance between the two, with them being obviously fond of each other. Jack is raving about how he cannot believe she is choosing to help them, believing it must have been challenging to mobilize her family. Mary just relays to him how happy and excited they were to help, and how her grandparents and parents taught her to never turn her back on those who need help. Jack asks Mary what Kent thinks about her coming up there to help him, so she explains that she and Kent are no longer in a relationship. She then asks him if Mrs. Rand works in the city, but he makes it clear that she passed away after Charlene was born. This is a sad memory for him, but he goes on to say that he is not sure Charlene's mother ever really liked it up there, because he thinks the mountains can be really hard on city folk. Mary conveys to Jack that she will be back the next day to go over the paperwork with him, while her brothers and father work on the house. Mike is tired and needs to rest, so they all decide to retire for the day. Mary, not over the magic of the lodge, decides to spend the night with Charlene and Jack. All of these things Mary feels a connection to. The next morning, they all return and decide on what parts of the house to repair. Mary jokes as she hangs around with Charlene. She looks exhausted, leading Jack to guess that Charlene kept her up all night, talking. The scene changes and Mike and his sons get to work on the lodge, while Mary works with Jack, filling forms. Jack and Mary soon finish up all the paperwork, and Jack jokes about how his hand would be less sore if he spent the day swinging an axe instead. The two exchange banter, and they are really starting to connect. Mary is also getting along with Charlene. She simply fits right in with him, his family, and his lifestyle. Mary is about to leave and Jack lets her know how nice it was having them in the lodge, leading her to promise to come around the next time she goes camping in the area. Charlene asks if Mary would take her along. Mary says she would, if Jack is okay with it. Jack doesn't have a problem with it. He adds that with all the work around the lodge, he has not even had the time to go camping himself. He also believes that his dear daughter deserves a break. Mary remains cordial and respectful with him, but he asks her to drop the formalities. In his eyes, she is already family. Mary thanks him for thinking that way before leaving. When she leaves, Charlene points out to her father that she can tell he actually likes Mary. He denies it at first, pretending she doesn't know what she is talking about. Charlene adds that she thinks Mary likes him too. Curious, Jack asks if Mary told her so, but turns out she did not. Charlene can simply tell that the both of them have chemistry and really enjoy each other's company. She herself likes the spirited Mary. The next scene is in Mary's office in the city. Her boss, Bob, comes out of a meeting to discuss the Christmas Lodge project, and he announces to an enthusiastic Mary that the board only approved half of the funding requested for the renovations and restoration. Mary is disappointed and begs Bob to let her speak to the chairman of the board. Although reluctant, Bob lets her through to the chairman, but despite Mary's efforts to discuss the lodge and her family's history with it, he insists that any more than half of the funding, and they would break the budget. Mary's heart breaks after hearing this. In the next scene, Mary tells Mike about the recent turn of events while they are in Grandpa's bedroom. Her grandpa, who is fast asleep, hears Mary's voice and wakes up. He asks what is wrong and Mary explains that they got half the money for the supplies, but the other half to hire a crew is unavailable. Grandpa reminds them that he handed over a construction company with a crew. Mike, realizing what he means, explains that they are booked till the new year, but Grandpa asks him to cancel those bookings. Mike insists that they cannot disappoint their customers, and even if they do, they all have bills to pay. Mike asks who is going to write them a check for the job. Grandpa says he would, adding how he wants the lodge to be his legacy. He also explains that the family has taken a lot from the lodge over the years, and it's about time they give something back. Mike considers it briefly, but refuses all the same. Grandpa offers to describe it differently, and speaks about a certain carpenter from Galilee, who sees helping people as his purpose and the right thing to do, regardless of payments or compensation. Grandpa advises that while Mike considers the situation at hand, he should also consider what Jesus would do to help Jack in his time of need, with no help in sight. He adds that he believes that with Jesus' guidance, he will make the right decision. Mike admits he cannot argue with Scripture and Grandpa tells him not to. He agrees to help, saying how the old man always gets his way. Grandpa says it is not him, but the Lord's lessons that he lives by, that put them on the right path. Jack finally decides to confess to Mary how he feels about her. Mary is reluctant to get into a relationship with him, because there is a lot at stake. She says if she agrees, it would not be just them. It would be Jack, Charlene, and her. She does not want Charlene getting hurt in any way. Fortunately, after some back and forth, she finally agrees to it. She admits that she feels the same, and is tired of fighting her feelings. Charlene, who has been eavesdropping on their entire conversation, can't help but smile at the positive turn of events. Before Mary leaves, Jack asks if it is all right to invite all her family to stay in the lodge for Christmas. Mary appreciates the offer, but points out there is still a lot of work to be done, and she does not want to disappoint them if it is not done in time. She thanks him and promises to speak to him soon before leaving. In the next scene, Mary is back at work and Bob tells her they spoke to their donors. They have decided to open a branch in the rural areas. He asks if she's willing to head the new office. Mary tells Yolanda we will be staying at the Christmas Lodge, and she also tells her about her relationship with Jack. Mary leaves to go to the hospital after getting a call from her mother about her grandpa having a stroke. She rushes to the hospital scared. Once there, they are told by Kathy that the stroke was mild, but they suggest the man should move into a care home. In the next scene, as they walk through the woods, Mary explains to Charlene that Grandpa might not be strong enough to make it up to the Christmas Lodge for Christmas. Charlene is upset about the news. Then, Mary goes to see her grandpa and joins him for physical therapy. The scene fades and then reveals Kathy, Betty, and Mary in the kitchen making a meal, and Jack driving up to the house with Charlene. They welcome them in. Charlene asks about their grandpa, and Mary explains that he could not make it. Charlene asks if they could go see him, so Mary insists they should discuss it later. After dinner, Mary and Jack sit outside. She tells him she found a location close to the lodge for the new office. Jack says Charlene will be glad, and also asks if she found a place to stay. She admits she is still looking. Jack says that if they were married, then she could stay at the lodge. She thinks it's not the right time for a conversation about marriage. A few days left before Christmas, the whole family show up at Christmas Lodge with Grandpa as a surprise. Charlene can't contain her excitement. She feels so loved. After the introductions, they settle in. Jack says a toast, ensuring to thank everyone, and at the end, proposes marriage to Mary, and she happily agrees. They are all happy about the turn of events. In the end, the Christmas Lodge allowed all of them to experience something memorable that night.